This is Will, N5OLA. I just ordered this HW-101, bought it off of eBay, and I'm going to do a restoration. I don't know anything about it. I don't know if it runs. I don't know what's going to need to be done to it. And this is probably similar for some of you guys out there and gals. You get a rig off of Facebook, Marketplace, or eBay, and maybe it runs, maybe it doesn't. How do you get it up to performance level? Especially if you don't have a lot of equipment at your disposal. Well, that's what I'm going to go through on this radio. I'm not going to provide lengthy narration. I'm just going to take you point by point through the restoration process as I do it. And I will tell you that there are a lot of people who do it differently. And I will probably get a lot of comments about, well, you didn't do it right. You should have used an oscilloscope. I'm not going to use an oscilloscope on this radio because most of you who are in my shoes and not professional radio people, you probably don't have an oscilloscope, but you will need a tube tester, or you need access to someone who does. You need a good soldering iron. For me, it's this Chinese-made Hakko. I love it. It's got adjustable temperature, and it's fabulous. Going to need a variety of tools, wire snips, needle nose pliers, a good multimeter. These are not expensive. I think I paid $35-40 for this one 3 years ago, and it served me well. I've also fallen in love with dental picks. I have a whole collection, and they're great for getting into boards, pulling out things, clearing holes. You'll see that in a bit. Not 100% necessary, but highly recommended. A good old-fashioned VTVM, a vacuum tube voltmeter with an RF probe, and you'll see why later. The frequency counter. This is going to make calibration really easy toward the end of the project. But anyway, let's just get on with it. I'm going to open this up and first of all just do a visual. Let's look at the cabinet. That's kind of important. I see some kind of, it looks like acid damage here. There's some rippling here that I'm going to need to pound out, make it flat. But overall, this cabinet's in good condition. You don't have a lot of scuffs and scrapes. I think most of this is stuff that's going to clean off. So that's nice. And the back looks good. Okay, the fun part, the preliminary visual inspection. I see that all the tubes are accounted for. The boards are pretty grimy, but not bad. I am going to wash it, but I've seen way worse. This I would date as from possibly 1975 or 76. It's not one of the later models because it has the old carbon comp resistors, the brown ones. These have a tendency to go out of tolerance, so I'm going to have to check all of them. Later on, these were replaced with carbon film, which are a lot more dependable. I see that it has the old paper electrolytic capacitors, as all HW-101s had. We're going to replace those. Let's see, this electrolytic I'm going to replace, and this one down here. And there are a couple on the underside as well. I'm going to check all the mylars with the ESR meter just to make sure they're not wonky. They'll probably be fine. Let's see what else. Oh, look at this. Look at those funny diodes. I'm going to replace those. I've never seen diodes like that before. It's actually a good idea if you really want to do a top-notch restoration. Replace these 4 diodes in the balanced modulator with what are called shotkeys, and I can provide the reference numbers on these. These were originally germanium diodes, and they have a tendency not to age very well. Again, nice cabinet. I don't know what happened to these feet. They're definitely going to get replaced, but just a few scratches, not bad. The underside of the boards look fine. It's not all that dirty. I will replace this electrolytic. I'm going to replace this capacitor, probably this mylar, just because it's easy to get to and fun. Wow. Oh, excellent. It's got the CW filter. That really increases its value right away. There is a wire running from the IF board to the spare jack that would have been installed for using some kind of accessory item. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to bring this back basically to the condition it would have been in if you had followed the manual to the letter. No modifications at all, unless it's in one of the Heathkit service bulletins. That's typically my motto. There are a lot of things you can do to these rigs to make them perform better. I'm not going to do any of those. I'm going to leave that up to you people out there. If you see a mod that you want to do, try it. See what happens. But I'm not going to do any. I'm just going to stick to the manual and the service bulletin. This is the stage of the game where you want to look for any kind of oddities, and I see one right away. Why is this tuning coil covered up like that? Let's open it up and see. Well, it turns out one of these clamps had come loose. These are used to hold the faceplate in place, but it looks like they used these guys, and these are supposed to be used to connect the cabinet to the chassis. I don't know why they did that. You know, you find little anomalies like this. Some builder 50 years ago got the instructions wrong. Okay, I have pulled off the lid of the RF cage just to see what's inside. The finals look good. They're not super dusty. Now I'm going to do something kind of controversial, and I'm going to actually fire it up and see what happens. I like to do that because it gives me a preview of the work ahead. Okay, the moment of truth. I've got the meter set on ALC because when I turn it on, I want to see if the meter responds. It should hit full range and then slowly come back down as the rig warms up. I want to see if the lights come on. I want to see if I've got reception and so on. Let's see. So far, so good. Give it a moment to warm up. Hopefully this is going to start its descent, and there it goes. That's good. Now, do we have reception? Okay, we have a hum. I find that 9 times out of 10, when I've got a hum, I can usually make that hum turn into received signal by simply reseating the tubes. Let's try that. I'm going to start on the audio board. And then we'll go to the product detector. It's not the RF gain. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Okay, just some bad contacts on the mode switch. That is super encouraging. However, look at those belts. Okay. Definitely need to be replaced. Absolutely. I want to see if the driver preselector affects the incoming signal. I'm sure it will, or I wouldn't likely I wouldn't have any signal at all if that wasn't working. But anyway, yeah, this is great. Oh, wow. Tuning's a little stiff. That's okay. We're going to take that Jackson drive off and clean it out. But first, This radio needs a good scrubbing. By the way, I'm pulling out the tubes and look at these finals. Usually there is going to be a dark metallic burn spot on the glass. This looks almost like new, except that it's dusty. This tells me that the rig probably either it got new finals or it hasn't seen much use. I saw this technique in a YouTube video by a Heathkit engineer named Robert Sumption, S-U-M-P-T-I-O-N. This is how he does it. This is how I do it. It works. A lot of people disagree with this. Some people say put it in the dishwasher. Some people say use various solvents. I think standard dishwashing detergent and warm water and a brush is about all you need. One thing to keep in mind, you don't want to spray water into these coils. If water gets in there, that's okay because we're going to put it in the oven. But there's no need to overdo it. You don't, for instance, you don't want to really spray concentrated water inside the VFO cabinet. Anyway, I've removed the knobs, I've removed the light bulbs and all the tubes. Let's start scrubbing. I'm going to start out with just a light rinse. Probably should have removed those two paper caps, but it doesn't matter. I'll get to it later. You want to be careful in this process to be gentle. You want to get your brush down in there, but you don't want to be so aggressive that you start breaking the ceramic cap leads or whatever. You know, the purpose here is just to bring it back like new. And also to help clean some of these electrical connections. You know, there's a lot to be gained from cleanliness, and that's the purpose of this step. And it just looks better. Completely scrubbed the boards. Also, I scrubbed bits of the cabinet here on the sides. Also down inside the RF cage. And now we can rinse. Let's see what it looks like. Let's take a close-up look. See how well we did. Look at that. Wow. Spectacular. Sometimes you have to get in there with a toothbrush. If there's a lot of nicotine and grime, you just have to get in there, scrub it out. That old toothbrush is really useful down in the RF cage. Sometimes this sheet metal gets kind of tarnished. You can't always get, yeah, it's not perfect, but we're gonna do what we can. Sometimes I'll even get in there with this old artist paintbrush just to get down in the... After you rinse it, you can see any grime that remains and then go back through and do it again as needed. But I think this one, with a little more rinsing, is going to be just fine. This resistor was replaced. Obviously it blew, and someone didn't have a 330 ohm resistor on hand, so they just put these two guys together. You can do that, it just looks funny. I'm going to take that out and fix it, but I've scrubbed the board here. I'm not going to be able to do anything about that staining, I don't think, because it's heat related. As far as the underside of the chassis goes, I'm going to do just a light brushing on the boards just to get the dust out of there. I'm going to focus on any exposed areas of sheet metal just to clean it up. I'm going to just try to make this ribbon cable look like new. Stay out of here. We can spray it, that's all we're going to do. Those switchboards are they're precious. Don't want to mess with them. Now the top. I'm going to use my toothbrush. I'm going to focus on getting grit in these areas here. I've got the oven set to 170, which is as low as my oven will go. I shook out as much of the water as I could. Now I'm going to leave it in the oven for 25 minutes. And so while that's happening, I've got a lot of knobs that need to be cleaned. So I'm just going to use my leftover soapy water to clean these knobs. As for the tubes, they're dusty. I do not recommend using soapy water with these tubes because you're going to lose a lot of the lettering. I left it in there for an extra 15 minutes with the heat turned off, just to add a little drying time, and here's the end result. Take a look. Quite nice. There's not much I can do about this tarnishing over here. I could go after it with some Brasso or something. Sometimes that works, but it's also messy, and I think I'm just gonna leave it. But yeah, look at that. If this were summertime, I would take it out to my back porch and let it sit in the sun all day. It's January, however, so I'm going to leave it in front of this heat lamp for about a day. So next I'm going to run all my tubes through the tube checker. We know that the radio works, so I'm pretty sure these tubes are probably going to be okay, but the tube checker will tell us if there are some leaks that may not be apparent just by turning on the radio. So another reason we do this tube inspection is we're looking for any cracks. This tube has some cracks on the top, and you see this white residue underneath the glass on top. That indicates it's dead. Throw it out. I know that once those are reset into the sockets, they're probably going to be crackly. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take some, this is just standard contact cleaner, and I'm going to spray a little bit on the tube leads. And I'm just going to give them a little brush just to try to clean them up a bit, establish a better contact. All my tubes checked out with the exception of that one that had the cracks in the top. Seriously, look at these finals. I mean, they're beautiful. Did this rig ever see any use? I wonder. The radio's all dry and ready for the next step, which is checking the resistors. I have created these reference sheets, cheat sheets, whatever, from the manual. If you have a copy of the manual, and you must have a copy of the manual if you're going to do a restoration, you'll note that in the assembly pages, they've got the values of the resistors mixed in with the capacitors and the diodes and the coils and the chokes and everything else. So what I did was I just isolated all the resistor values so that for each board, I can quickly refer to this and just test, one after another really fast. Anyway, I'll leave a link to this under the video. And here we introduce the question of what is the threshold for a good resistor and a bad resistor? At what point do you say, hey, that resistor needs to come out? 15% is typically where I draw the line. And it really depends on the application too. It depends on which board you're on. And you don't have to actually lift the legs of the resistors in order to test them as you would with a capacitor. You just test it right in circuit. And if the resistor is low, that's not a problem. It's low because of the surrounding resistances. But if it's way higher than the 15% threshold, I'm going to pull it. Even if it's a little higher, even if it's 17%, I'm going to pull it. So for instance, this resistor, it's a 4.7K. Look at that. More than double what it should be. That one's coming out. So I'm going to go board by board, check each resistor. The whole process will take a little over an hour. It's essential because if you've got a resistor that's not at its prescribed value, you're going to have problems. Most of the time. Sometimes you can get away with it, Sometimes you'll have a resistor that's 300% over tolerance. And because it's not in a critical circuit, it's going to be okay. In other situations, a resistor could be 20% over and you've got problems. So better to just take them out. We ended up with 5 resistors that will need to be replaced. And the only one I really dread is this one on the RF driver board, because the RF driver board, to get to the back, you've got to wade through this thicket of switchboards. Sometimes it's easier just to perform some very careful surgery, installing the resistor, clipping the resistor here, and very carefully soldering to these 2 lead points on top of the board. Okay, to remove the resistor, I'm going to locate the resistor on the X-ray. This is the one I want to pull, and so this shows me where the traces are. And I am going to insert a dental pick on this side and then flip the unit around and apply heat. While I was removing resistors, I pulled these 2 paper caps and found that under one of them there was this strange residue. When I looked at the cap, you can see how it's bulging, and it has a strong smell of electrolytic fluid, which means it's about to die. In fact, it's probably going to die a very dramatic death with possible fireworks. So I checked it on my ESR meter. It gives a really good reading. This is a 20 microfarad capacitor, and my ESR meter says it's good if the capacitance is anything under 330 microfarads. But as you can see, it's not good. It's bulging. It's gonna pop. So we always replace the paper electrolytics, always. Okay, probably time to call it a day, because I have replaced all of the mylars, all of the electrolytics. Here's a couple mylar replacements. There's one, there's that electrolytic. And then there are a couple that, just because these modern equivalents are just kind of big, I put them on the back side of the board. There's one, and then also I replaced these 4 diodes in the balance modulator with 1N5711 shot keys for longer life and better performance. Remember when we first fired this thing up and we got nothing but a hum, and we decided that the mode switch was dirty? Okay, now I'm going to fix that. This is our contact cleaner. I'm going to just spray a little bit on the contact here, on that switch. I'm going to just work that switch back and forth. Get that cleanser into the contacts. I'm going to do the same thing on the band switch. This is super important. I'm going to put some deoxit. It's just another kind of contact cleaner. This one's got a lubricant. I'm going to put just a little bit on each of those wafer switches. Already did the mode switch, did the band switch. Going to do the 2 gain pots. And I'm going to put some into the contacts of the switches. The switches are a little tight and hard to move. Doesn't take a lot. Okay. Oh yeah, whole lot better. This was really tight initially. Now it's moving much more freely. Okay, so with the AF gain pot, so we can expose what's inside. I've heard it said that you can't get lubricant inside that pot, but I will differ because I've had crackly pots. I spray some deoxit gold in there and the crackle goes away. I don't know. Seems to work for me. So just gonna get it right in there. And then just work it in there. Okay, it's the moment of truth. Next day, I've got all the tubes back in. All my recapping has been done, new resistors. We want to see where we stand on operation. So I'm going to fire it up, see what happens, see if we get any smoke, okay? So far, so good. And by the way, I don't expect it to work perfectly right now. Okay, something's obviously wrong. I'm not getting a signal. Last time the receiver worked, now it's not working. Sometimes components manifest their darker sides at different stages of the restoration. Sometimes something tests good one day and the next day it tests bad. Something's wrong, let's see. My first suspicion is I'm not seeing this tube lighting up purple as it should. Obviously, this is where I should be doing some voltage checks, but I prefer to start out by doing tactile inspections, okay? i.e., make sure the tubes are in snug. Also, these two 7-watt resistors should be burning hot, and they're not. I already checked them, but I'm going to test them one more time just to make sure something didn't happen in the interim. Okay, I've got these out of circuit now, and I'm going to test them on their own just to see. This is the 2.5K resistor, and it's showing 9 megohms. That's bad. This is the 1K. Looks like it's open. So they're both bad. Don't know why that happened. They tested fine yesterday. So these are the replacements. This is a 1K. It should be 7 watts. I'm putting in 13 watts. This is the 2.5K, should be 7 watts. This is a 10 watt. Just going to provide a little more heat protection for that circuit. All right, moment of truth. Okay, I see the tube lighting up. Good sign. I check to make sure all the tubes are properly seated. When you get that kind of crackling, that's usually caused either by a tube that's not properly set, or the process of cleaning might have left a little bit of residue. And I do have a signal coming through. That's a good sign. I'm going to leave this on and let it burn in for a while.
Mike, please copy my 1 Hotel Louisiana.
Okay, it's about an hour later. All the crackle went away. Probably just some moisture buildup.
Thank you for the call. Have a great time, you guys. 7-3. This is Kilo Alpha 5 Hotel Sierra Lima. That's Kilo Alpha 5 Hotel Sierra Lima.
Okay, time for new belts for the driver pre-selector. I just slipped them underneath the pulley wheels like that. And then I'm going to get them onto the top pulley shaft here. Got them on there. Just going to raise this shaft, get it inside that opening. Make sure that the top pulley lines up with the bottom. Okay. Looks pretty straight. And then I'm just going to tighten this collar. We're done.
Now what you're running there about 5.9 plus, okay?
So I've got all the knobs on. All the tubes are installed. Got the tube covers and now the belts. What's next? Well, as I lean now toward the alignment process, I want to find out first of all if I'm firing on all bands. Because if I'm not, I need to stop and figure out what's going on a particular band if it's dead. And that happens sometimes. So I'm going to do this by just running a basic voltage check on all bands. This is actually the first step of the alignment process. So let's do that. Okay, I'm going to be checking DC voltage. I've got the black lead running to the chassis. Any point on the chassis is fine. I like to just put it right there. And then red lead goes to the test point, TP, on the band switchboard. To get a connection, you have to kind of lean it over because it's trying to make contact with the foil on the other side. So now I'm going to just run through each band, see what kind of voltage we got. I'm not going to try to adjust the voltage right now. I just want to see if a negative voltage is present. It should be between negative 0.5 and negative 5. Eventually, I'm going to adjust it down to around negative 2 per the instructions in the alignment process. Okay, I've got it. Negative voltage showing in all the bands. That's good. What does it mean if I don't get a voltage reading on a particular band? It usually means that one of these band switch crystals is out for that particular band. So if I'm getting nothing on 40 meters, what I usually do is remove the 40 meter crystal and pop in a 40 meter crystal that I have on hand from one of my cadaver rigs and see if that fixes the problem. I do that first because these are super easy to get out. You do have to get your soldering iron in there, but it's really not difficult. You heat up one pin, then you heat up the other, and at the same time as you're heating it, you're working it out. You pop the new one in, and if you've got a voltage reading, then you're good. You know that it was a bad crystal. So right away, this is why visual inspections are so important. I see a problem right there. This is on the Heterodyne oscillator board, and that's bad. Thankfully, I do have a cadaver rig, and I can just plunder it and replace that, because that's not going to work. That's bad. This is my HW-101 boneyard, and here is a Heterodyne oscillator board, and there is a 28 megahertz tuning coil. Let's take it off. Okay, I got the tuning coil off of my cadaver board, and it was a 29 megahertz rather, not 28. Okay, I got it out. Took about 2 minutes, no big deal. Electrically, it's okay. Nothing has disconnected. I may try to fix it because, you know, they don't make these anymore, I don't think, do they? Might be useful one day. Okay, that is in place. Now I want to make sure that the bands are alive after performing that little piece of surgery. So, go back to the meter. All the bands have voltage. Very good.
Years ago, and so the last ones that I've got one that's 4.
So we know that the receiver is working great. But one thing I've noticed is that the tuning is real squishy. And when you get to a certain point in the band, you'll be turning the knob, and then the dial on the inside stops moving, even though the knob is turning. Of course, it's not doing that now that I want it to. Okay, so I've reached this is actually the stopping point of the variable capacitor. That tells me that it's out of alignment. So basically, this just needs to go to the stop point. And now, what are we going to do about this VFO? This is where you have to make some critical decisions about time. Do you want to take that VFO apart? This is the VFO. Do you want to take that out and look inside and clean it and work on it? Well, of course you do, because you want it to work to its utmost. And if the tuning's squishy, that tells me that there's some old grease in the bearings or inside the Jackson drive. Well, inside the Jackson drive bearings, or on the shaft. There could be all kinds of grease and muck inside there. I've seen some real tragic cases. But I see that after messing with it for a while, it's not stopping anymore. That's good. Let's look. Oh, see? Now there it's doing it. I'm tuning. You can hear the signal's changing. The frequency's changing, but the band's not moving. Why? Well, it just needs to be cleaned. That's probably the most onerous step in the journey, but we're going to do it because it needs to be done. Removing the VFO involves some easy steps and some difficult steps. The easy steps are desoldering these 3 wires, unplugging this, unscrewing it here, and then the 2 set screws inside here. That's easy. The difficult part, well, these 2 screws are easy. The difficult part, right in here, behind this wire harness, you've got 2 more screws that have to, 2 more nuts that have to come out. Oh, not easy, but it's got to be done. 2 really important tools for removal and reinstallation of the VFO. You're going to need one of these to get those nuts out of there. And this is the Heathkit nut starter. You're going to need one of these to get those nuts back in there. Really, don't even attempt this next step without a nut starter. Seriously, you'll go crazy. Okay, here's what we got. And it looks pretty good. It's clean inside. I don't see a lot of gunk. But we'll see what we can find on these the bearings here of the variable capacitor. Those are going to need to be sprayed out with contact cleaner and then packed with graphite grease. This ceramic capacitor needs to be glued down to the wall. They have a tendency to vibrate, which causes tuning fluctuations and warble. Finally, I want to check the value of all these resistors and just make sure nothing's way out of spec. And then finally, I'm going to add a grounding strap. It's going to run from the wall of the VFO to the body of the variable capacitor and also to this tab here. That's going to give us smoother tuning and eliminate any jittery warble in the tuning that there might be. All right, next morning, this is the finished product. Got that capacitor glued down. Here's the ground strap, grounding both the body of the variable capacitor and the tuning tab here. Also checked out all the resistors. Everything's pretty well in tolerance. Not exactly, but close enough. All within about 12 or 15%. Also, graphite grease packed in the bearings. Just trying to keep a really good ground contact throughout the unit. Now that I've got the VFO out, this would be a really good time to swap out this yellow dial with something new. This came from the, it's called Radio Daze, spelled D-A-Z-E, and it's about 20 bucks. I think it's worth it. This one's old, it's brittle, light doesn't go through it very well anymore. Let's do it. Okay, I've got the VFO set in place. Next step is to install the front Jackson drive, then the set screws, followed by these 4 screws on the back. As mentioned, getting these 2 screws under the wire harness in is really tricky. I'm going to use a screwdriver or something to press down on the wire harness to give me some clearance, taking care to avoid that little ceramic capacitor right there because it will break easily. Then there's the matter of getting the lock washer on there. So what I do is I put it on the end of a magnetized screwdriver and just ease it back in there and set it on top of the screw. Takes a little while, takes a little patience, but you can do it. There it is. Nice, clean, new dial. Everything seems to be firing on all cylinders. Time now to start the alignment process. And this is where you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So you'll remember early on, we did a voltage check on each band to make sure that everything was lighting up. All the bands were fine, but now we need to go through and do that same thing again, but this time we're going to adjust the voltages so that they're all within a range of -0.5 to -2. This is step 1 in the alignment process shown in the manual. Okay, so all my voltages are now within that range. So next step is to adjust the transformers. I have to apologize, early on in this video, I was referring to these as coils. They are coils. They have coils inside of them, but technically they are transformers. This one is a 6.8 megahertz trap coil that should not be adjusted. I ain't gonna touch it, but I'm gonna adjust this one, and this one for a peak indication on the meter. I've got it set as per the manual. I've got, and now I'm just going to go through one by one and get a peak reading. Couldn't be easier. They're probably pretty close already. Almost forgot, this transformer has a top adjustment and a bottom adjustment. Both of them need to be adjusted so that the meter peaks. Just FYI. Okay, now we're going to adjust the driver grid and the driver plate. I've got the rig on its side now. I'm going to put it in the calibrate position and then get a nice strong signal. By the way, this thing tunes like a dream. Oh, it's got the perfect amount of tension. It's not tight, it's not locking up anywhere. Wonderful. Working on that VFO is always rewarding. Okay. So, gonna get a max signal. Let me turn that down because that's annoying. And now I'm gonna adjust first the driver grid and then the driver plate. I've got the driver pre-selector right at the 12 o'clock position, and that's important. All of this is in the manual, but I'm just gonna go through it here on the video. What I'm trying to do is peak. Okay, that's driver grid. Now driver plate. Okay, now I'm gonna go over to 29.0 and I'm gonna adjust the driver pre-selector right there. And that's in the manual. Gonna find my signal. There we go. And now, gonna go for a peak reading. Now going to 21.0, and I'm going to move this to that mark as per the manual. Get myself a reading here. Okay. Just going for a peak reading. That's the driver grid. This is the driver plate. Now we're going to 20 meters, 14 megahertz. I'm going to adjust this as per the manual. It's all in there. This is just an illustration. Driver grid. Going for the 14 megahertz. And driver plate. Okay, now I'm just going to go do 40 meters, leaving the driver pre-selector in the same position. I'm being very careful with these, trying to get the tuning wand right in there without any damage. Those things are sensitive. Next step is to calibrate the VFO. This can be a little challenging and a little frustrating. You've got 2 trimmers right here. And then there's the tuning coil here. This tuning coil basically shifts the frequency this way or this way. What the trimmers do is tighten that range or widen it so that it corresponds to what's on the dial. Let me just illustrate that. I've got this thing tuned up on 80 meters with a dummy load. Look at that. Right away, I want to be on 3.5 and I'm at 3.4988. That is pretty nice. But let's see where we're at say 3.7. If the trimmers are set right, putting it at the 200 mark should show me at something like 3.698. Let's see. Wow. That's good news. That means I don't have to do a lot of fiddling with the trimmers. What I'm going to do instead, because I'm close enough, I'm going to tune again. I'm at 3.498. And now by holding in this button and tuning this way, I'm going to get it 3.5. Now the frequency is in line with what's on the dial. So let's go back to the 200 mark. That's perfect. Holy cow. Exciting. So ends the calibration of the VFO. Next, we're going to adjust the bias. Heathkit very cleverly put a little triangle on the meter. That's what you're going to aim for. Got it tuned up for 80 meters and the level is down to nothing. I've got the microphone right there so I can activate it with my knee. And I'm going to get the bias adjustment ready with my screwdriver. Key the mic and adjust. Next, I'm going to peak transformer T1, and I'm going to do that by putting out a signal. It's already 100 watts. I'm going to adjust that, looking for a peak. And I think we were already at peak. Neutralizing the finals is extremely important. These are the instructions in the manual. I don't use these instructions. I use the instructions from the service bulletin. If you look online, you'll find the HW-101 service bulletin, and it's got this in it. And it's a much more complicated way to do it, but it's super accurate. All you need is one of these vacuum tube voltmeters and an RF probe. The RF probe will run you about 25 to 30 bucks. You have to do two things. You have to desolder the B+ voltage that goes to the tubes, and always put some kind of electrical tape or something on that wire. You don't want that wire touching your chassis. Wow, boom. Next, I'm going to desolder this 100 ohm resistor that carries the filament voltage. It's detached and just kind of hanging in space while I run the next procedure. Okay, as per the instructions, I've got the frequency set at 28.5. I've already adjusted it for a peak. And I've got the RF probe in the antenna jack. And that's connected to my 1970-ish vintage Heathkit VTVM. It's going to really come in handy right now, because when I put the rig in tune, there's just a tiny bit of RF voltage that's slipping through. We're going to adjust that now. I'm going to adjust that and bring the RF voltage down to 0. Now I'm turning that neutralizing capacitor until I get the reading right at 0. Okay, I've reattached the 100 ohm resistor, and I've reattached the B+ high voltage. By the way, have I mentioned these things are deadly? 800 volts. Be very careful. You could die. Next step in the alignment journey is the carrier null. That's going to involve adjusting this pot and this capacitor. I'm all tuned up on 80 meters, except I've got my mic level all the way down. I'm going to attach a mic, and we've got the RF probe going right into the center pin of the antenna jack, and then the negative going to chassis ground. Got the tiny end of the nut starter going into the carrier null pot, and I'll be adjusting that once I click the mic. Now remember, what we're going for is as close to 0 as possible. Oh, and there's a lot of oscillation there, so I'm twisting the pot, trying to get a minimum reading. Okay. And now, using a screwdriver, I'm going to adjust that capacitor. And there we go. Folks, we've just about reached the end of the alignment process. All I need to do now is to adjust the Heterodyne oscillator coils. As mentioned, those are on the top and on the bottom. Got 3 on the top and 4 or 5 on the bottom. So let's start. We want to tune each band, get our maximum signal, and then adjust, where is it? There it is. Adjust each of those Heterodyne oscillator tuning coils to get a max on the slow side. Okay, now I'm going to do 40 meters, tuning up to get a maximum signal. Oh, that's not too good. Got low power on 40. That is no fun. So low power output on 40 meters is addressed in the Heathkit service bulletins. And first thing we got to do is take out that resistor and replace it with wire. That's the first recommendation in the service bulletins. Okay, we're back. That resistor is out and replaced with this wire. Let's see if it makes any difference. I feel like we did a little better. We're up to 70 watts. Oh, look at that. Look at that. And I got that higher reading by adjusting the loading coil. I did that before and wasn't able to get more than 50 watts. So take that tip and get rid of the resistor if you happen to have one in your rig. The later models didn't have that resistor. I said that adjusting the Heterodyne oscillator was the final step in the tuning process. That's not actually true. Aligning the crystal calibrator is the final step. I do this with a frequency counter. I've got my signal basically at 3.700 and the dial is at 200. And I want to make sure that my calibrator is 0 beating at that frequency, so that later, if I need to readjust the knob, I can do it without a frequency counter. So I'm going to put it back into the calibrate position. And it's not 0 beating. So, ooh, that's annoying, isn't it? I'm going to adjust that. That's essentially a 0 beat. Okay, now let's check our tune. Look at that. My God, the thing runs like new, and it looks like new. It's a beauty. Let's go listen to somebody. Let's go to 20, see if anybody's out there.
For VTV, and I had it two radios per band, and by golly, I worked the world with it. And after I got my general,
let's find somebody to talk to on 20 meters. That'd be fun.
J5 JKG 59.
November 5, Oscar Lima Alpha. Roger, N5 OLA, name is Will, Whiskey India, Lima Lima, coming to you from South Texas, over.
Hi Will, nice to meet you. My name is Rick and I'm in Calgary. You're 59 and 5, 59 plus 5.
Roger that, you're a good strong 59 here. And just to say, I'm trying out at Heathkit HW-101 and you're my first QSO on this rig. I think you're the first in about 50 years, over. Roger that. Love these old rigs. Good luck, and 73. Well, that's nice to hear. Here, let's go through the various bands just to show the level of output. I was on 20, and output there is right at 100 watts. With a little SWR, but not much. Okay, 80 meters. We've got about 120 watts. You remember 40 meters, if you saw the video, we had a little problem with 40, but we are now at full output. Okay, 15 meters, solid 100 watts. And 10 meters, 80 watts, which is right at spec. 28.5 is giving us about 75 watts, which is right at spec. And 29 megahertz. Once again, about 80. And 29.5. I can't tune that in on my antenna, but I would give it about 70. Overall, a wonderful transceiver. I can't get over what a pleasure it was to restore this rig. It really repaid the time and effort well. The receiver is strong. The output is amazing. It's nice and clean. I mean, really well taken care of. I have to commend the previous owner for keeping it in good shape, not throwing it in the attic or the garage, but keeping it in a moisture-controlled environment. And it's ready for a new owner. So I'm going to put the cabinet on it, take some pictures, and find a new home for this rig. Now, what to do about the cabinet? The cabinet's in pretty good shape. It's not too scuffed, not too scratched, but it does have this little dent running from the center onto the right. Just looks like something heavy was set there. I can knock that out easy. Okay, top cabinet cleaned up pretty well, and I was able to get that warp out of the metal for the most part. There are still there are a couple dimples that they're not gonna go away completely. This spot is a little concerning. I'm gonna clean it, see what happens. I smelt it, and it smells slightly of acid, so that could be some kind of corrosion, in which case there may not be much I can do about it except to apply some touch-up paint. Touch-up paint rarely blends perfectly with these cabinets because the paint on these Heathkits was not consistent from year to year. Sometimes it's a little bluer, sometimes it's a little greener, so we're gonna just do the best we can. So there's the end result. This is where we did our bit of touch-up paint. In this light, you can't really see it. I mean, it doesn't jump out at you like it did before. Definitely a slight color difference, but I don't know. I think that top came out okay overall. It's not bad. Let's finish it up. And she's done. I'd say that cabinet, under the circumstances, came out quite nice. Is it perfect? No. Still has a couple dimples from where I flattened the warped spot, but you know, it's okay. The thing is about half a century old, and I'd say under the circumstances, it's really looking good. When I put it back together, I made sure to use all matching hardware and new hardware. There's that spot. If you're looking for it, you'll see it. Like I said before, I'm not trying to fool anybody. I'm just trying to de-emphasize that area. And if I leave it open with exposed metal, it's really gonna stick out. So now, to find her a new home. Thanks for watching. This is N5OLA.